Yeah, no, 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 no. Yeah, 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 no, 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 no. Melanated minds with the crown restored. Asiatic truth that we cannot ignore. Honor to noble Drew Ali, we rise. Nationality reclaimed, open your eyes. Love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, the spark. No more strangers walking in the dark. Research first, let the facts ignite. Real Morse talk every week, truth over hype. This is knowledge, this is heritage, this is consciousness. Welcome to Real Morse Talk with your hostess, Prime Minister Durriyyah. Hey. Yeah, no, 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 no. Yeah, no, 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 no. Shadow hour. 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 You are now tuned into Real Morse Talk. Melanated glow, crown back on the throne. Asiatic spirit, yes, we finally home. Honor noble Drew Ali, we proclaim. Nationality restored, we reclaim the name. Yeah, yeah. Love, truth, peace, let it spark that fire.
Freedom, justice,
Lifting hearts higher.
no more strangers.
We know our part.
Real Morse Talk,
Truth from the heart.
Real Morse Talk,
Truth from the heart.
Real Morse Talk.
That's right.
Yeah, na, 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 na.
Shadow hour.
Yeah, na, 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 na.
Shadow hour.
Yeah, na, 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 na.
Shadow hour.
Yeah, na, 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 na.
That's it. Rise up. Rise up. Rise up. That's it. Rise up.
This is heritage,
That's it. Rise up.
this is consciousness,
That's it. Rise up.
that's your heritage.
That's it. Rise up.
Never haven't been.
That's it. Rise up. This is heritage. This is consciousness with your hostess, Prime Minister Durriyyah.
All right, welcome to Real Morris Talk. Oh, gotta fix myself up here. How is everyone doing this evening? Ah, my headpiece is up. All right, a little fix it up there. A little fixing up there. All right, everyone. So, welcome to another episode of Real Morris Talk. I am your hostess. I am Prime Minister National Grand Sheikh Durriyyah Bay, and welcome to Shadow Hour. I'm going to, with Real Morris Talk today, we have a lot to go over. So I'm always going to first rise and give praises to the Creator, whom I choose to call love, for allowing me to wake up this rising in my right frame of mind with my good common sense, life, health, and consciousness, with the ability to stay on this road, this Islamic road, because sometimes it's rough and sometimes it's smooth. I want to give honor to each and every one of you who found time to come on the call today on to Real Morris Talk, because that's what we're more. It's talking real, whether it's spelled MOOR or MURMURR. No matter how you spell it, it doesn't take away from it that it's Moorish. All right. So people want to make controversy about how to spell more. We know in ancient times there was no O's and like that. So we have to make sure that we're not allowing people to take away from who we really are by making accusations or trying to make like themselves as they're smart, so that they want to be recognized, or maybe find a name for themselves. Today everyone wants to find a name for themselves. So that's kind of what people are doing. And I do apologize. I'm fixing my hairdresser. It was fine. And then, here everything is real, right on time. It's all live. It's all real. So if I'm fixing my head dress to my curtain to whatever, you all are doing it right with me on Real Morse Talk. So there's a couple of things I wanted to go into today, and we do have, we're talking about the rights of the child today, and I'm coming from my booklet, The Rights of the Child. This is where I'm coming from, and a lot of people, email me a lot about the rights of the child, about what their rights are for their children. So I decided to do a two-part episode. So this way I trustfully can answer all questions that anyone has about the rights of the child, their rights as parents. And all of this is stemming from when we did our Mother's Day special. So you hold it up so you all can see it's only $10. It's called The Rights of the Child. When we did our Mother's Day special, it stemmed a lot of questions about mother, father, parental rights. What should we be doing for our children, for our community? All of these stimulated thought. And so this put us on a very good trend to go down this road, because the rights of the child is important. I mean, we need to be teaching our children what their rights are. But not only that, we need to know what the child's rights are, and we need to know the rights of the parent as well. So we're going to cover that, the rights of the child, the rights of the parent. We're going to cover all of those things right here on Real Morse Talk. Again, Real Morse Talk is stemmed from the teachings of the Prophet Noble Drawley. He told us to be ourselves, not someone else. He taught us to know about our nationality and birthrights. These are things that he told us that we need to know, that we should be doing. And so all of this stems from that, making sure that we know what our rights are, that we're living the kind of life that we should be living. We as a people have always been denied our rights, and we really do not understand what our rights are. We don't really take a lot of time. And as long as we're happy with what the European has given us so far, then it seems like that we get silent for a while, right? We don't push the envelope, or someone will say, well, you shouldn't really push that, or you shouldn't really do that. I mean, we're at peace right now, so we shouldn't really fight, about certain things. And I'm like, that's just absolutely nonsense. We never supposed to stop fighting for our rights. As a matter of fact, if we were being treated fairly, like we should be being treated, we wouldn't have to fight for any type of rights. if we were given what we are supposed to have, if everyone was being treated the way that they're supposed to be treated, then we wouldn't be having to fight about any type of rights at all. But because we are not being treated the way we should be treated, we have to fight for our rights. And people who become complacent and comfortable really are dangerous to us in society. So, I said I started putting things down on paper so I can remember what I want to say to you all. Trustfully keep you engaged in conversation. I will ask some questions and I'll ask you to post in the chat. It's up to you whether you do or not, but it's great if you do post because you're engaging in the conversation that I'm talking about. I want you to remember, we're talking about the rights of the child. I want you to remember to purchase this book before you leave today. This book is only $10. All right. And it's so full of information. I'm going to be coming from that. So I want to read, welcome to another powerful episode of Real Morris Talk. We are episode 18. Can we say 18? We are episode 18. So we've gotten into 18 episodes of Real Morris Talk. I couldn't be more pleased that we've gotten 18 episodes, whether we have 2 to 3 viewers or hundreds of viewers. The point is that I have the courage, the information, and the energy to come to you every Thursday and give you information that you may find as useful tools. Because the prophet said that these tools are we find in the workshop of the mind, where things are made of thought. And this is where we build up character. So I'm trusting that I'm helping you build character with the information that we talk about here. I have my water and my tea. And I had a long day today. Today was Community Day. I always have to give honor to Community Day. It's always the very last Thursday of the month. And today our children wanted to make ice cream. So we made brownie ice cream and cookie ice cream sandwiches. We made our own ice cream, some of us, and our own brownie mix and own cookie mix. And so I'll have my son bring me up one of the cookie ones so I can show you a little bit. It's chocolate chip. His favorite types of things is chocolate on chocolate. So we did that today, and I give honor to the children. Because a lot of the children watch me speak every Thursday. They sit down with their parents. So honor and much love to you children who are watching me today on Real Morris Talk. And I would think, because they hear me in class all day, I'm fussing with them all day. I'm, fighting with them all in love and care. And when I say love, I don't use love lightly. Because, a lot of times you hear everybody say, oh, I love you. Like you hear people who are actors or vocalists or singers or whatever. And they'll say, oh, I love you all. Thank you so much. You don't love me. That's love is just thrown loosely around. And we'll talk about that another time on Real More Talk. But that's not love. You could say, I appreciate you for supporting me, but do not tell me you love me because you do not love me. And when they start saying that, I just turn it off because they're not talking to me. Because love is something that is a connection between people, not something that you just throw out to say because it sounds good. And you'll hear everyone say the same thing over and over, or people who don't even believe in religion or God or whatever, or do lots of drugs and alcohol and, promiscuous activities and say, oh, I want to thank Jesus, or I want to thank God. They can thank Jesus all they want. I want to thank God, or whatever they do. All those things they say. And then the next minute they're doing something heinous. So, we have to be very careful. The prophet talks about words. He said a language to improve what thy society. So he's talking about words we have to be careful with. So I just want to give much honor to every last Thursday of the month is Community Day. And our children did it up to date. Some of them, their cookies and ice cream sandwiches look better than mine. And I've been cooking for years. So they did a wonderful job today. And the instructors that were there to support also. So thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. So let's get into it, the rights of the child. So I said I want to welcome to another episode of Real More Talk. This is episode 18. And where research becomes before opinion, where history is examined with discipline, and where the protection of family, nationality, and future generations remain a sacred responsibility. And so people like myself who have a little bit of knowledge in my head and others that do have knowledge and know the laws, this is what our responsibilities are, to bring them to our society. Tonight's discussion is centered on a subject that affects every household, every parent, every mother, every father, and every child: the rights of the child. So I did a summary of what I'm going to talk about today. So I want to read that to you. This episode explores the spiritual, social, lawful, and international discussions surrounding children's rights, parental responsibility, identity, protection, and the role of society in shaping the children's future generations. My book that I just showed you begins with the concept that children are precious from the moment of conception, and emphasizes that life must be protected, nurtured, and cultivated carefully. The book explains that parents carry a serious responsibility not only to provide food and shelter, but also provide moral guidance, emotional support, education, protection, and stability. And that's from every parent. And I want to include in there every grandparent as well. That's what our responsibility is. A major theme throughout my book is the importance of understanding and comprehension parental authority, responsibility. This discussion examines how government institutions and lawful systems have historically influenced family structures and parental rights. My book also raises questions concerning birth registration systems, lawful and legal guardianship, state involvement in child welfare matters, and the relationship between parents and governmental agencies. Another major portion of my work focuses on the historical treatment of children and families throughout history, including reference to enslaved era records, birth documentation, and legal lawful systems that classify human beings as property. This discussion, I want to encourage you on this discussion that we're having tonight to listen carefully and critically, to take notes. I always encourage to take notes. You don't have to take notes if you don't desire to. I, like to take notes whenever I'm listening to someone speak. Some things I may need to go back over or look over later. So I want to take notes. So it's up to you if you desire to take notes or not. All right. And I want this to understand that this impacts the modern society's social structure and family dynamics. This episode also explores maternal health, prenatal care, nutritional and fetal development. My book outlines the stages of pregnancy from conception through birth, emphasizing the importance of healthy living, proper nutrition, emotional balance, and environmental conditions during pregnancy. The discussion explains how early development affects future generations and why protecting children begins long before birth. I want to also focus on internal human rights laws and evolution of children's rights globally. Also discuss the history of the Declaration of the Rights of the Child and the United States Convention of the Rights of the Child. These declarations establish internal principles recognizing that children deserve special care, protection, education, health care, dignity, and freedom from exploitation and discrimination. In this episode, I'll highlight the Declaration of the Rights of the Child, that every child has the right to a name and a nationality. Every child deserves education, healthcare, nutrition, and protection. Every child should grow up in an atmosphere of love and understanding, security whenever it's possible for us to protect our children. And that responsibility falls first with the parents. Children should be protected from neglect, exploitation, discrimination, abuse. The discussions we'll talk about is the importance of both the masculine and feminine energies in the upbringing and development of children. This book stresses the balance of households, responsibilities, parental communication, support systems are essential for healthy child development. Things I want to talk about is discrimination, international human rights law. This episode of Real Morris Talk, we're going to have to face talking about discrimination. We're going to have to face talking about language, sex, religion, social origin, disabilities, and economic conditions. Every child deserves equal protection and opportunity and dignity. Okay. So in this episode of Real Morris Talk, we're going to talk about the law or policy is responsibility, it's awareness, and it's almost understanding of the value of our children, the importance of family structure, and the need for communities to protect and uplift future generations. It takes a village to raise one child. It takes a community to raise a village. So please listen tonight with your consciousness as we enter into episode 18 of Real Morris Talk. All right. And so I want to start off with some questions this shadow hour. And the first question I want to start off with is, who protects the child? And you can write this down if you want to, and write it down and answer it and then post it in the chat. Who defines parental authority? Who shapes the future generations? And what happens when families no longer understand their own rights? Tonight, we're going to examine this sensitive and controversial discussion in our modern society, the rights of the child. Do parents truly understand their rights? Should governments have power over family decisions? What protection should every child receive? At what point does society help? And what point does it interfere? Okay. So those are questions that I wanted to put out there for you to think about as we go over this and talk. So for the first part of my segment of my book, I talk about seeds are perfect, and it's on pages 2 to 3. If you already have the book, you can follow along 2 and 3. The importance of children from conception, the responsibility of parents before and after birth, protecting future generations physically, mentally, and socially and spiritually. Children are our future generations, responsibility before conception, the role of mothers and fathers, why society is struggling with child development today, how the environment affects children mentally and emotionally, nutrition, stress, media, and household energy. So I have to ask myself these questions. And in the book, I talk about that on pages 2 and 3. And I talk about the child is as perfect as the seed from which it comes. And of course, we know that we get that from Prophet Noble Drawley. He told us about that. And seeds are perfect. So, and the rights of the child starts from the time of conception. The feminine energy cultivates the seed, and this is called life by universal law. Now, seeds are perfect, yea, as perfect as the source from which they come, but they are not unfolded into life made manifest. The child is as perfect as the mother is, so the seed must be deeply planted in a soil that the child might grow, unfold as the bud unfolds to show the flower. The human seed that came forth from the heart of Allah was fully ordained to be the Lord and Lordesses of plane of soul and the plane of things made manifest. So Allah, the husbandman of everything that is, threw forth this human seed into the soil of soul. It grew apace and became a living soul and became the Lord and the Lordesses of all the kingdom of the soul. And I got that from the creation and fall of man. Okay. And so I'm coming from that from pages 2. And like I said, from pages 2 to 3. So we have to ask ourselves, do modern systems prepare people for parenthood? And that's the thing. So we know that no one is truly ready to be a parent. And a lot of times we become parents at a very, very early age. We as women are not really ready to be parents, and neither is the man ready to be parents. So right in the very beginning of there is where we have to start working in our communities, in our households. We have to start preparing our women in case they decide to become mothers. And I'm not saying that, oh, every woman wants to be a mother. You know, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that every woman should learn about being a mother. And no one's ever really prepared for motherhood, just like men are not prepared for fatherhood. What normally happens is we literally learn by experience. We literally learn how to become parents by experience. And I talked about this in the past episode that the prophet came with the chapter 23, holy instructions for thy children, for us to give instructions on how to raise our children. But in the meantime, even with those instructions, parenthood starts way before you get pregnant, way before the seed is planted. Because what needs to happen is we need to prepare ourselves for having children. So you don't really know what kind of parent we're going to be when we first start out, because again, it's a learning curve, right? We're learning how to be parents. And so as mothers, because what a lot of us try to do, I know I tried to prepare my daughters in case they were going to be mothers. I tried to tell them the things, that I went through as a mother, the good and the not so good things that I went through as a mother, and try to prepare them for some of those things. And a lot of times the generation of children today, they'll say, oh, that's when you were coming up. That's old fashioned or whatever. But there's nothing wrong with old fashioned values, right? And the child, we have the right to tell these things to our children, because we have to start protecting our children at a very, very early age. We have to prepare them for life at a very early age. The prophet said, prepare them early with instruction, and what season their mind with what the maxims of truth. Watch the bent of their inclination, set them right in their youth, and let no evil habits gain strength with their years. So this is what we are striving to do with our children. Okay. And we have to ask ourselves another question. Why are so many children emotionally disconnected today? A lot of children are emotionally disconnected today because they're basically raising themselves. And I spoke about this in past times when I'm on, that children are raising themselves in the household. So what's happening is they're taking on the responsibility of a parent in the household, because if mother and father both work, or the household is not full, it's either not having a mother and father in the household, their mother's missing or the father's missing, then they're getting half of a household. And so they do not connect themselves emotionally. And the Holy Quran Universal, Prophet Muhammad talks about the soulless child. He talks about how children are being born today, and because parents are not loving each other, and this is way back then when the Quran was written, that because parents do not love each other, a lot of the sex is just emotional. It's not emotional sex, really. It's sex for pleasure or games or whatever, but it's no real connection there. So when a child is being created, there's no connection to the two people that's creating it. So it's not created out of love. So this child now is being raised by one parent, who more than likely the mother does not talk to the womb, does not read to the womb, does not cultivate the seed inside the womb. She's not taught that. That's what we have to teach. And so the child is born soulless. So the child is born without a soul. So these children that can look you in your face and use all kinds of profane language towards you, these children who will look at you and shoot you on sight, these children who have no connection, can care less about you, are so disrespectful to you, these children are soulless children. And we have to ask ourselves, how do we get our children back souls? Because they're disconnected emotionally. There's no connection because there's no love before these children are created. There's no love between the two individuals. And there's usually a lot of chaos. So the father really doesn't want the mother to have the child. The mother wants to have the child. So you hear a lot of children say, I wasn't asked to be born. A lot of children say that to their parents when they don't want to do what you say. And you're telling them, I'm your mother. And they'll say, well, I didn't ask you to be my mother, or I didn't ask you to be born. And what happens is when they're saying that to you, what I said is that you didn't have to ask to be born. It was my decision to bring you into this world. That was my decision. And because that was my decision, then that was my decision to raise you in this world the way I see fit. And so we have to be able to start saying things like that to these children instead of breaking down, becoming emotional. And I see a lot of Asiatic mothers, melanated mothers, that we things we don't normally do, trying to raise our children like European children are raised. Our children are raised differently. And so we should not try to merge our families or, assimilate our families into a different culture and try to raise them that way, because that's not how our children are created. We have to work better at making sure our children stay connected. The parents, we have to have a better connection with our children. So if you're a working parent, you have to still find time to connect with your children. Movie nights, time for homework, maybe even some Sunday school. I remember my children used to hate me saying, all right, we're having a family meeting. They'd be like, oh, mother, do we have to? Yes, we do. We have to have a family meeting, cook some popcorn, have some snacks or whatever, sit down and have a discussion with the things that's going on that I didn't like and I want things to be changing, or things that they're doing that I didn't care about, or things that they want to talk about. But we had those family discussions. We need to bring that back into our family dynamic, because we need to know what's going on with our children. A lot of times there's a show on TV called, a lot of times I'm thinking of these shows, I cannot think of the name of the show. It's about a retirement home. It'll come to me later. But anyway, a couple of the episodes, they showed that the daughter was totally disconnected from the mother. So this is just shows in family dynamic. And she was running to an older woman to talk about advice, from boys to beauty tips to whatever. She felt more comfortable talking to this elder woman versus the mother. And the mother was getting very upset. And then she started threatening the woman that the daughter was running to. And I'm like saying, this is so ridiculous. Why would you threaten her? She don't have nothing to do with your daughter deciding to come to her. As a matter of fact, she's told the daughter several times, you should talk to your mother. But she's an elder. She enjoys the conversations with the young girl. And so she conversates with them. But the girl, please don't tell my mother. And so she doesn't tell the mother. And the reason she's not telling the mother is because she feels as though she's going to lose that connection with the child. Now, you have to ask yourself in that situation, as an adult talking to a child, and a child asks you not to say something to the parent, would you keep that child's secret instead of telling the parent? And some people might say, well, what? It depends on what it is. I think that the mother or father has the right to know what's going on with the child. And I don't think that any adult should tell a child that I'm going to keep your secret. I think that's dangerous, because then they'll start doing other things and maybe doing things to the child, and it's our secret. Or maybe the child is doing things that they shouldn't do. Now it's your secret, and now the parent, the adult that's listening, is starting to feel uncomfortable about what the child is telling them. And then it's too late to try to go to the parent because you've been keeping all these secrets. So I'm saying, as a parent, as an adult in a relationship as a parent, and I know people don't like the word parent, but I'm fine with the word parent, is that come and connect with your children. Find out what's going on with them socially. Find out what's going on with them physically. Find out what's going on with them economically. You need to talk to your children. You need to open up the doors of communication with your children. And so now we have to say, so now a lot of people post on Facebook and things. So has social media taken the replacement of parents, of friends? Because I see people post their whole life on social media, every second, every minute. What's going on from their social life with their parents to their boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives, whatever. Everything's on social media now. And then people on social media are giving you their opinion of what your life is, or the child's life. So the child should not be posting all their business on social media. But where do they get it from? The parent. Because you see parents all day long, hardly looking up all day long, parents. And so now the child's mimicking you. So the parents is barely talking. The child might come to the parent and saying something, and the parent is not really paying attention to the child. So we have to ask ourselves these questions and think about it for yourself. And I'm asking you because I'm concerned, as a community, as a society, what are we allowing social media to do to our children? And a lot of parents are suing Facebook and YouTube. Is a big old thing out because they're saying a lot of things that's going on with their children is the social media company's fault. But you, as a parent, can control your child's social media. When you say you're going to take a device from them, take it from them and stop giving it back to them as soon as you think they're doing something, or shut down social media times at appropriate times. So, like other countries, if they shut down by 9 o'clock, they only allowed to have it on the weekend or whatever. We have to start finding a way to pull social media out of our households. We have to pull it out and start replacing it with conversation. Oh, good old board games, good old card games, good old, talking to people, putting puzzles together. They got so many Asiatic puzzles out now. It's an Asiatic company that sells it. Family structure time. Sit down, and your children may be resistant to it at first. Let's start eating at the table together as a family. A lot of times I know when Taj comes, a lot of times, and he's here and the children or whatever, we try to eat down socially as a family. When my grandchildren are here, I try to make sure everybody eats at the same time. I sit my grandchildren down at the table. We all, have prayer together, and then they eat together as a family unit. These are things in families that most of the time when the parent cook, everybody go in a separate direction with their plate. When I was coming up, we had to sit at the table and have a conversation. We had to sit at the table and no media devices. I remember my father was really big on that. Sitting down to the table. I remember when Sheep Allow would sit down with us and eat, and he would get so angry in the beginning because my father would look at me and I would say, no social media devices, no phones or anything at the table. But he had got used to it hanging around my father and stuff like that. But a lot of people are so addicted to their phones and they don't realize they're addicted to their phones. And then when you try to take that away from them, they get angry just like a child. When you take away their devices from them, they get very angry about the devices. They want to play with them devices and they don't care. Then they get angry and throw a fit or whatever with you because they want to play with them devices. So we have to ask ourselves, is social media raising our children? Or are these devices raising our children? I know a lot of parents have come to me about, grandparents have come to me too about their children where they say their daughter or son, they're busy. And when they go to visit them, that the social media, that the children are playing on these games all day or whatever. And their parent will say, oh, stop bothering me. And they plug it in, unplug it, give it to the child for 5-6 hours. That device is raising that child for 5-6 hours. The child will come out when the battery starts to die. They'll whine and scream and shout and all of that. And they want to have a fit because now they're not looking at that device. And so that the programming, and we don't realize that our children are being programmed. And so the rights of the child has the right for parental discretion and advisement. You should not be throwing your children in front of social media devices. You give them some time. They deserve to have some time to get on those devices. If that's the world we live in, and maybe put them on educational programs. But you have to check on the child, take them off of it, give them a break, and then some social interaction with your child. This media device or these tablets or computers should not be raising your children. All right. So, so it takes years for a child to build confidence and only a few moments for it to be damaged. So when you're raising your children, you're building the confidence with them. Especially, I remember when I was coming up, it was this woman, her and her children were very, very dark olive. They were really extremely dark olive, long hair or whatever. And, back in the day, they used to try to make you feel bad about being dark olive. What I admired about this mother with her daughter, she taught her everything to uplift her. And I felt so excited. I learned so much from her because I'm dark olive too, but not deep as she is. She was beautifully deep olive. And her mother taught her about looking at yourself and making sure that you're beautiful. So I was able to instill that into my daughters. No matter how dark your complexion is, you're beautiful. You're made from by the creator to be creative. You're original. The deeper melanin your skin, the deeper the melanin, the closer you are to to the universe, to the ancient history of our people. Her mother, all that. And I was taking it and I would be listening to her talk to her daughter because I would do her daughter's hair. And I would be listening to her talk to her daughter. And I sucked that in, all of that beautiful wisdom she gave her daughter. You couldn't tell her daughter nothing. She dressed every day. She was sharp from the head to the shoes. And it was nothing you could say to her to make her feel bad. I remember we went to a lot of things, a lot of times guys would call her things like monkey ape, you blackie, and all, children are cruel, all these things. I learned from her. And she was younger than me by maybe 4 or 5 years, maybe. I learned from her about confidence. Even though I learned from my father, my grandparents, but sometimes you learn more from other people about how beautiful she was, and she throw her head up. If you try to talk to her like she wasn't nobody, she'd throw that head up and strut. And I mean, she could walk too. And I learned so much from her about confidence. She didn't let words beat her down. And let me tell you something. When we was coming up, I remember they used to sing, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." Biggest lie ever told. And I'm like, where'd that come from? The Europeans, because they wanted you to believe that they could break every bone, beat you down, and call you whatever they wanted to call you, and you shouldn't be hurt, or it didn't. Words damage people. They damage our children. And so they need to know rights. I remember coming up, I was all kinds of things because I was different. I dressed different. I talked different. Things about me that was different. And children try to make me feel bad. Even little so-called boyfriends I had would join in with other crowds and things like that. But I learned to overcome those things and be proud of who I am. I didn't let words damage who I was. But a lot of people are not that strong. And like I said, as I was growing and I learned from this mother who was teaching her daughter, and I'm sitting and listening, and I'm the one that's just doing her hair. And like if she ever made it like a dress for a graduation or prom or for a special event, she would come to me to make her daughter's dresses and things. I learned from her. She had a very successful job. Her mother did. She had it just over broke, but she was successful at it. And she made her daughter successful. So her daughter, teaching her daughter, rubbed off on me and made me a successful individual. And I don't really tell that story a lot because, I just never really get the opportunity to do it. But my family also let me be very proud of who I was. So being a Moor and things like that never made me feel bad about who I was. And the things that I learned and did about my eating habits or none of that, even when family members tried to beat me down about it, I still had that support. But there's other things you can learn from support too. And like I said, I had two sides of my family. And this is what's so important about the rights of the child. The child has the right to both sides of the family. Both sides of the family. My father's side of the family were the ones that were Islamic. They were the ones that were Moors. They're the ones that taught me about my national and divine creed that the Prophet Noble Jolly taught them. My family came from that atmosphere from my great-grandmother, Sydney, and probably before her, but I know about who I can talk about who I know about. My great-grandmother, Sydney, to my grandmother, Julia, to my father, Leon Ali Bey. Those are where I got my, proud Moorish roots from, was those people in my family that I was able to pass on. But you see how the rights of the child, my family knew that I had the right to both sides of my family. And my mother, even though she didn't like it, a lot of times she tried to keep me from my father with that back and forth things that people do. That's so ridiculous. My father never gave up. And that's the thing I have to give him so much honor for. A lot of fathers walk away. Your child has the right to know both parents, whether the parents getting along or not. Your child has the right to know both parents, whether you like the individual that now he is or like the individual that she is. They have the right to both parents. And we should not be separating the children from one parent unless the other parent is harmful. Now, if the other parent is very harmful and their life is not together and they're on drugs and alcohol and all those things, yes, you don't want to subject your children to them. If you have them meet them, it has to be a controlled environment that you control, whichever parent is civil minded. But the thing is that I think in our households, even if we're not living together, it's important that the child knows both sides of the family. I think about if I didn't know my father's side of family, who would I have become? And even though I didn't believe in all the Christian things and all of that stuff, I never did that. I'm wondering would I be? Would I be atheist maybe, or would have found my way to Islam? And I think for me, I think some of us are just born to walk this road. Some of us are just born to do that. And that's, to walk this road. That's why I was going to honor, praise to Allah and honor to the Prophet, and then thank them for our right frame of mind and good common sense, because I think some of us are just meant to walk this road. And I am willing to walk this road. So I think it's just in me. Okay. I think it's just in me. So we have to think about those things, what happens to our children. And I'll give another example. I used to work at the hospital. And one night I had this sister come in and her brother. They came in the hospital. And when they came into the hospital, I was so excited because the names was Bay. They were family though. I think the women were Bays and the men were Eels. And that's what the girl was explaining to me. And so I said, okay. She said, that's what my father taught us. So somewhere, wherever they were together or whatever house he was in, they obviously taught them that Bays would be the women and Eels would be the men, or something to that effect. Anyway, so I was talking to them. I was excited about talking to them. So they were saying, but we do not practice more science. We do not practice Islam. And I said, oh, okay. I'm suddenly talking to them. I always get excited about seeing more. And they were like, no, we followed my mother and she's a Christian. So now you see how that affected. My father was never around. So and I've met lots of people like this, but this particular family I found very intriguing because they still wanted to keep the names because they were taught the importance of the names, but they did not want the Islamic portion because of the father did not spend time with the family or really to teach them. And they said that the mother did not really know much about Islam. So therefore, they just were raised with the mother. So they go to church with the mother. Again, the child has the right to both parents. If the father would have been more present in the children's lives, I believe that the children would have maybe embraced both sides, and maybe they would have learned about the more and the importance of it, and they would have been willing to walk this road. But because that didn't happen, again, the rights of the child didn't get those rights. All right. So I want to move on because I like to take you all on a journey and stories that I share, because stories are so important. I think stories can help us reflect who we are. Stories can help remind us of the things and importance of information. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is who raises the child. And I went over that, the role of the parents. Now, what I want to talk about is a lot of times, let me go through this first. I want to go to the family versus the system based on who owns our children. In that chapter of my book, it talked about the role of the parents versus the institutions, schools influencing children, media influence, social conditions, government involvement in family matters, foster systems, and child welfare discussions, and fear that many parents have. And I want to talk about that because I get a lot of email where parents have lost their children to the system. Either someone calls Child Protective Services, I know it's called here, and it's called similar to in different places. Child Protective Services mainly is the name I know. There's other ones that talk about the division in family services and all of that. So we want to talk about the role of the parent versus institution. First of all, in the rights of the child, it tells you the parent is the one who is the sole responsibility lies with the parent. So that is your responsibility that lies with the parent. So these agencies cannot tell you what your responsibility is with the child. And I need everyone to learn the rights of the child. Please purchase that book. I need you to learn the rights of the child. I go over it in detail in that book. Okay, you'll learn the role of the parent and your family responsibilities and what to do in these governmental agencies. So also we want to talk about school influences. So on the news lately, it was a school that did a play. And the school had the Asiatic children being slaves, the European children being the slave masters, and they were hanging babies from the noose of a neck in a school. Now, one of my problems with that whole thing is the teacher was not expelled from the school. And the school is still standing. And Asiatics are not making enough noise to me about what happened in the school system. And this is a danger for our children to be in these schools. So the school system has a big influence on your child. And we spoke about this in the prior segment, that what happens with these children. So your children leave home and they go to school for almost 8 hours or more, because I know our school is about 8 hours there in online schooling. And so what happens is that so they go there for breakfast and they have the social gathering of whoever they're around, their friends and people who are not friends. They're around all these people. And then they eat their breakfast and then they go to classes all day and they have all these different teachers. And if you look at most of the public school systems and now most of the private schools or parochial schools, unless it's an Asiatic school, you're going to find predominantly European instructors. Except for in schools that are in really bad areas, considered bad areas, real downtrodden areas, you may find more Asiatic teachers or instructors in those schools. But a lot of them are Christian minded or assimilated minded, which means they have assimilated into the European society. So most of them are not interested in their own legacy or history. So they're not going to teach it to your children. The curriculum is made up by public school system. So they have to follow the curriculum that they're giving them. And this is what they're teaching you all day. So the school system, the public school system, private, parochial, all have influence on your children. Even here at Online School for Moorish Children, we have influence on the children, but our influence is Asiatic influence, Moorish influence. So imagine the influence that's out there in those school systems that influence your children. And I know, listen, my children, they went to public school because I was a single parent working. I was single. The father was not in the household, whatever, was not in the household. So I raised my children. And the thing is this, I worked, but also I raised them. And then I also taught them from home. So I used to teach them, listen, they're going to tell you all kinds of foolishness in that history class, but I'm going to tell you the truth about what they tell you. So I'm going to, when they teach it to you, that I'm going to disseminate the whole thing. I'm going to break it down to you the truth, the way that it's supposed to be. So I didn't allow the school system to tell my children a bunch of garbage, and that's all that stayed in their head. And I wanted to know today, so what did you learn today in school? So let's talk about it. And I would break it down to them and teach them from home as well. So they had dual learning, dual erudition. They had erudition from home. And then whatever educational system they were getting in those schools, because I wanted to make sure my children didn't grow up with the mindset of assimilation. Today, that's not happening in our household. So some of you have to send your children to public school. I get it. You don't have the money to private schools. And even if you do, the private schools are not going to teach them about who you are and your legacy. Most of them going to private school will never learn about their legacy. But a lot in the public school, and we know that Trump has now removed all Asiatic history out of the public school system. They were piece by piece doing it, but now he moved all of Asiatic history out of the public school system. So there's no Asiatic history in the public school systems right now. So a lot of Moors have said, oh, I'm so glad they took that Black history out or that African history out. And I heard them and I was like, okay, so they took it out of the school. So let me ask you a question. What do your children learn historically? Only about European history? See how some things we say do not make sense and we call them our own pain? Because, yes, they learned that it was African-American history, but they was learning about people that look like them. You could teach them that at one time people try to call us African-Americans, but that's not who we are. You have to take the information and then make sure that they learn it correctly. But don't try to take away historically what we've done historically from our children. And if you want them to learn more history, you have to teach it to them because there's only a few Moors historically that they talk about. But you don't have any history if you're not coming to this school about Moors. You don't even know who they are. Literally, you know about maybe me and Taj, and no one writes about us really. And most of the time, if people create videos about us, they're creating videos that are negative or trying to tear down what we're saying. They're not literally trying to teach, say, well, this sister, is teaching this and we're going to, continue on. Now, sometimes some people that follow Taj, I call all people that follow Taj Tajites, and they love Taj. And some of them will take some of the information that Taj learned, and then they will take it and I hear them teaching it over and over again. Some of them will take it in a good way, some of them will not. But I do hear people from time to time using that information. All right. So you as a role as a parent, from school to media influence to social conditioning, you have to be on top of it with your children. And listen, my mother told me she didn't think I was going to have children because I had to raise my brothers and sisters. But I told my mother if I ever have children, what I had asked the Creator to do is if I ever had children, to please make sure that I had the ability to take care of them. I wanted to be able to take care of my children. And that was really important to me, being able to take care of my children and raise my children. So I did want children. Yes, I got pregnant at a younger age, like a lot of us do or whatever. But I wanted my children because I had other alternatives. But I wanted my children because of what I was taught, what I learned about, having children, what we should do with our children. And I never forget my aunt, she sat me down and she was saying, that's how I learned about Miriam, Yahshua's mother, how she had her first child at 15. And it wasn't, unlikely for us to be 15, 16, 17 having children. But the lessons that we learned from having them would be important. And this is still children raising children. Some children are 13, 14 having children. I was at least a little older, but still not quite prepared about how to be a parent or how to raise children. I had to learn, and I did have people in my corner to help me with the moral responsibilities of being a parent and the responsibilities of how to raise my child, how to raise them right, how to make sure I feed them right, how to make sure I educate them right, how I had spiritual guidance with their upcoming. These are rights that children have. So when we talk about rights, parents don't realize that from the time of conception, when you have these children, from the time of conception to the time of demise, no longer being in this present form, your responsibility of a parent never stops. You don't stop parenting just because your children become grown. I had a sister one time, I was talking to her, and she was like, I put all of her children out at 18 and put them out after they graduate. And I was like, but where are they going to go? I don't care, but they got to get up out of my house. What kind of mentality is that? And I like the prophet telling us your children are in 3 times 7. So until they're 21, they should not even be leaving the household if they decide to. He said 3 times 7. So when I went through it with my children trying to leave home before, I'll be like, you can put all the things you want, but until you are 21 years of age, you'll remain under this roof, under my rules and regulations, under this house until 21, unless you decide to go to college. If you decide to go to college, then yes, you're still in school. So you're in college, so I can monitor what I can from college. And don't let me have to come to there looking for you. So I rule with an iron fist as a mother. Why? Because I cared about the future of my children. The child has rights. And we have to make sure as parents first, we enforce the rights. That's the rights that they have. You being their parent, you looking after them, protecting them, guiding them. That's the right that children have. And you as a parent is your responsibility. Okay. All right. So we talk about who spends more time shaping our children, us or the outside world? And that's a question that you all can type in the chat and answer. Us or the outside world? Who spends more time? I hear a lot of parents when they take their children out of this school, they say, my child wants to learn more social engagement. So they want to, be around more children in social engagement. So now they pick up bad habits. I remember one parent called crying about her child hanging out with the wrong crowd. Now he did time in jail, and he just recently got out of jail. Okay, so, but you was worried about him being socially engaged out there with the outside world, and the social engagement landed him in a dungeon where he should never have been. He went to the dungeon, should have never went there. We don't put our children in dungeons or have them go there. But if they do go there for unforeseen circumstances, we need to get them out immediately. Our children should never be in there. We need to get them out immediately, because the damage has already begun psychologically when they arrested them and took them in and put them behind those bars to threaten them and put fear in them. So now we have to get on the ball as parents. We're talking about the rights of the child today here on Real More Talk. We as parents don't think that the child don't have rights that we're supposed to live up to. The child has rights. But we as parents have to guide the rights of the child. It's our responsibility to see that those rights are carried out, the rights that they have. All right, so who do they spend more time with? You would want to trust that they would spend more time at home, right? Because home, it should be a happy place for children to come emotionally. They should want to be home. They should love when they see their mother or father, want to give them a big hug, hug them really tightly. They should want to hug them and kiss them and whatever. And then, some families are not connected emotionally like that. Like some parents don't really hug and kiss their children, because maybe they never were hugged and kissed. That doesn't mean that you do not start developing that with your children. And they should never be too big for you to hug or kiss them, or never want to show that emotion. Because remember earlier, I spoke about the soulless child. Even children that have autism, the European society try to tell us that children that have autism don't really want to be kissed or hugged or whatever. And that's just so false. They don't want to be kissed and hugged. Those children need love too. They need to be loved. And we need to learn to teach them emotion. If that's a part that's missing, then we need to teach them that, how to hug and how to be emotional connected, to you and family. So they don't have to be distant from you. Those are things that are taught by the parent. Outside society cannot teach your child that. And mothers, we're emotionally connected. Why are we emotionally connected to the child? Because we carry that child for 9 months. If the child stays in there for 9 months, we carry that child for 9 months. And so what happens is that we get emotionally attached to the seed that's inside of us. So when the seed is inside of us, we should be cultivating that seed the whole time. My children, I rub my, abdomen. We call it the belly because it extends your abdomen, extends your belly out. So a lot of us time we carry them in our belly, but we're really carrying our child on our abdomen. Is where is the real truth. Is where the child is being carried, and so the child is there and growing, and we should be rubbing our, child, letting them feel that emotional is rubbing connection. We should be reading to them. I read the Quran, Universal Quran and Circle 7 to my children, the 101s. I read all kinds of literature to my children, all kinds of Asiatic literature. And listen, they even came when they came out loving to read. I read to them then, even when they were small. I gave them books. And I laughed because my son, to this day, he used to take all of his books, especially his dictionary, because all of my children had to learn the whole entire dictionary. They had to learn encyclopedias, dictionaries. And even when it was time to go to bed at night, this was with my son, he would put over blanket over his head and have his little flashlight in there reading when he should be in bed. I bought him all kinds of books. So I got to remember the books that I bought him by this Asiatic author, letting him know that he was a target, from the time, by the time our children turn like 10, 11, they targets. The Europeans make them targets. And I wanted him to understand all of the things he needed to look out for as an Asiatic mother. And I explained to him that the language may say Black or African American, but I want you to learn to highlight that and put the Asiatic there. Let's cross the line out and put Asiatic there. So that way he wouldn't be confused. But my son is very intelligent, so he didn't, but he appreciated those books. But that's the kind of things that I gave him. I gave my daughters all kinds of books about modesty, being a more woman, learning those things. I even wrote myself because I am a writer. I wrote for them things. I used to give my daughters little cards and things like that to let them know I love them. I'll give them flowers and all kinds of things, just trying to stay emotionally connected to our children. So from the time of conception until they're no longer in this planet. And this is the reason why we say born date to our children, because those children are born. But you as the parent gave birth. Mother, you gave birth to that child. So if you have 30 children, you have 30 birthdays because you gave birth 30 times. So those are your birthdays. No one gives birth to themselves. No one does. You're born. You are born. And when you're born with inalienable rights. You have those rights from birth. And I'm talking about these rights because as a parent, it's our responsibility to carry the rights out for you. And I'm not talking about just rights that are in documentation. I'm talking about the rights that you have to give to your children being born. So today we're talking about what? The rights of the child. Okay. All right. All right. So now I want to talk just a little bit more about the government and stepping into the rights of our children. So now we're going to talk about the document. So a lot of you all do not have the rights of the child document. If you do have it, I need you to read it. Remember the Declaration of the Rights of the Child. Originally, the original date, I believe, was in 1920. I have it in my book. But the original one, it took them at least a good another 30 years to 1959 when they readopted the rights of the child. And then they started putting that the child has a right. So let's talk about Principle 3. I want to start with Principle 3. So Principle 3, every child from the birth, which means the mother gave birth to that child, has a right to a name and a nationality. From the time, even before you birth the child, you can have right to a name and a nationality. But once they're here, now as a parent, it is your responsibility to give your child a name and make sure your child is nationally recognized. So now when we are trying to bringing the European in about, the European won't let me do this and that, I can understand that about 30 years ago, maybe. But now, as parents, when we're having children, why are we not giving our children a name and a nationality? Because you're giving your children names that allude to slavery. And then you're also hyphenating those names. So you're bringing your child still into slavery, even though now you're supposed to be conscious of who you are. Your child should not be hyphenated Smith Jones or Jones Eo and all that. And I know a lot of Moors don't like me saying, and I really don't care what you do not like. I'm telling you the truth. You need to get rid of those names and stop trying to name your child slave names and then try to make me accept it. Or try to force it on someone else. The prophets are trying to force on a civilized world. You're trying to force these names that allude to slavery. As a parent, you are responsible for making sure your child is born with a free name and know who they are nationally. That is your responsibility as a parent. And just because you decide to get into a relationship with someone who's not practicing more science does not mean that you fall down on the job. Your child still needs to know who they are by name and nationality because that's their birthright. Stop making excuses or blaming each other. Now, if you have no part in the child's life, there's times when you can use these European courts, when you can go into the court and fight for the right of your child and say, I'm no longer with this parent, but I want my child to have my free national name. I want my child to know who they are culturally and economically, because listen, this is in the rights of the child. These are rights that are documented in an International Year of the Child and the rights of the child. These are things that are documented that you could do to make sure you protect your child's rights. Your child should not be growing up in Negroism, or, not with the names of Bayali and Eel. And there's so many times you hear that these children do not know who they are. Now, some people started using the day, D-E-Y, and I don't do the day, but some people do day because that's not the names the prophet brought us. And the day comes from the day treaties, and it has nothing to do with who we are. But some people didn't want to be Bay, they didn't want to be Ali, they didn't want to be ill, so they took on day, and they call that part of Moorish identity. Well, if that's what you want to do, day. The thing is, your child has the right to know this. As a parent, you have fallen down on your job if your child is born under Negroism right now. If your child is born with a slave name and not a free national name, you have fallen down on your job and you are not protecting the rights of your child. And it's not too late. That's how we're going to get into that birth certificate and all that. It's not too late to correct the wrongs. Okay? All right. So I'm going to stop for a moment here, try to revamp some of the things we went over, and then we're going to talk about the birth certificate and identity. I want to go to my chat and see what's in my chat and see if some of you all answered any of the questions or had anything that you wanted to share. Madoudi, Islam Prime Minister, and all. Shukran Islam. Yes. Okay. Lee Bay 2334. Love, true peace, freedom, and justice. Islam, Moors, Muslims, nobles. All right. Jonah Chess, Seymours. Let me see. Arnabai. I don't know if those are acronyms or a name, but I'm gonna say Arnabai, Islam Prime Minister, Islam. We have to debrief our children. Absolutely correct. Lee Bay 2334. Okay, he's talking about praise Allah. We know Allah is not a masculine energy, so I'm not sure why you keep putting father there, but we'll talk about that too. We know that Allah is a feminine energy, not a masculine energy. All right, but praise Allah, supreme, holy, and divine. And then he talked about Prophet Noble Jolly born on January 8th, 1886. established the Moorish Science Temple in 1913. And we know because of him, that is exactly why we're here. All right, so shukran and shukran for that. That's at Lee Bay 2334. We appreciate you every time you come on. You remind us of who our prophet is, and we appreciate that. All right. He's talking about the 14th Amendment again, as he normally does, about the Dred Scott decision, the slave name. And we're talking about that. And we could also use the Dred Scott decision in that on how important a name is. The Social Security cards, what the Social Security cards were created for. All right. And then we have Arnabot. Tell us something about holy breath. Are you saying tell us something about holy breath? Well, sure, I'll be glad to tell you about the holy breath. We're talking about the rights of the child if you want to connect that into the holy breath. But why don't you type in here to us about something about the holy breath? Why don't you type in what you know about the holy breath? Because the prophet talked about that in our 101 questions. So what do you know about holy breath? Why don't you type that in for us and tell us what you know about the holy breath? All right. All right. Lee Bay 2334. In the political affairs of denationalization, Morris branded black so-called Negroes, African Americans. All right. So yes, we know about that. Yes. So shukran. And then he's talking, more about that. I'm sure you all can read that in the chat. All right. My segment today was on the rights of the child. So just in case you did not know, B.L. Davis, Islam, my big sis, all right. Islam Prime Minister, Sons of Destiny, Moorish Divine and National Movement, not even the Constitution was still here 30 years ago. Says what? The Constitution was still here 30 years ago. Okay. 30 years ago. Okay. 1791. Okay. All right. All right. Nationalization, nationalization, civilization, okay, civilian citizenship, estate, corporation, city, town. All right, so more information coming from Lee Bay 2334. All right, so what I was really looking for in this chat was some of you all reactions to what I was talking about is reference to the rights of the child. Some of the things that I'm talking about, I would like for you all to communicate back and forth with me on some of the things that I'm talking about in the rights of the child and maybe some of your experiences. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for, from people who actually want to go, back and forth with some of the information or, be able to share in the information that I'm seeking to make sure that you all understand when I'm talking about the rights of the child, because the rights of the child is not just what's in documentation. Our children are born with rights, and those rights start at birth. All right. And from birth, it tells us that one of the things it starts with is a name and a nationality. Okay. So I was talking about that. So I wanted to share. So way back in the day, when I used to go around doing different things, a young sister, we are so eager when we're young in the movement and doing things. So in the schools that we had, the public schools, what I did, because I wanted my children not to have an easier time in school, not a difficult time. So I went around with this legal pad at the time, the yellow legal pad, right? And I went around and I went to parents, I went door to door to door, having parents fill out the information about learning about their children being Asiatics and not, Negro, Black, and colors. A list of things I had about names, the children being taught their history, being taught about who they were. And so I had all of this on a piece of paper, and I went around to different houses and knocked on the doors, and some people rejected, some accepted it. And even people that were in so-called Christian households, they were accepting the information that I was given. So I was really excited about it. So when I took it up to the school, they had no choice but to incorporate the information about who we were inside of the curriculum for the schools. and watching the language that they didn't all agree on doing the Asiatic because some of them did not really understand, but they were with the African American or calling the children African descent instead of calling them black or Negroes. And so people say one person cannot make a difference or one individual, but I was able to make a difference in the school system. When I moved to the area in 1991, I had a couple people call me and say, "Do you think that they're still going to honor that what you did now that you have left the area?" And I said, that's a good question because one of the things that when you make a change like that, you have to constantly follow up, follow up, follow up. And so I got involved in my own life in this area, and I really didn't get to go back and see how that played out. And in those school systems where the children were learning about themselves, they stopped doing those ridiculous videos with the, running around naked like savages and stuff. And I'm not saying there's not cultures or people on other sides that don't run around, without putting clothes and things on like that. And I'm not saying that they're savages by that's the way that they live because that's what they know. What I'm saying is that's not most of our culture and who we are. And so to put that in the mind frame that we're going around booger, booger, boogers or saying those kind of languages, because that's how they said, like you couldn't understand what they were saying. And that's the kind of impression they were putting in our minds as children. And like I had shared the week prior, I knew better. So I knew better, but everybody does not get the opportunity to know better. So I knew better. Everybody doesn't get that opportunity to know better. So I knew better. All right. So I wanted a couple of people posting. So it's saying that there's some of you on here posting that I wanted to see what you thought about some of the things that I was speaking about before we go to the birth certificate and identification. Let me take some of my tea. I always try to make sure I have my herbal teas. So good. All right. So I haven't seen any of you all communicating with me in the chat. And listen, all of us, let me just do this. How many of you all know about the rights of the child? How many just by posting it in the chat that you know about the rights of the child? Let me know how many of you all know about your child has rights. And if your child, and some of you all are probably my age group, and so you may have grandchildren. So what about the rights of your grandchildren? Post that in the chat because your children may need to be reminded that your grandchildren have rights. So we're talking about these rights today. All right. So, things become even deeper when we begin discussing the birth record, registration systems, and legal and lawful identity. Now we get really deep into that because I talked about the rights of our children as parents, that we need to, know the child's rights and give the child the rights that they're supposed to have. We're supposed to know that, right, as parents and grandparents. So we need to be able to tell our children about their rights and our grandchildren about their rights. So it gets deeper because, there's a lot of people on the birth certificate. So at one time, a lot of Moors was going around authenticating the birth certificate. That was the most ridiculous thing because once you proclaim your free national status, that birth certificate no longer applies to you as a lawful document. So now we know. So let's take a look at this now because we're talking about modern day time. So let's take a look at this. So now under this current people who are in the office in the White House, now they want you to have an identification through birth certificate. So now if you need to have your birth certificate corrected or changed, you can do that now because they try to change it for people who change their sex. So if you want to have a birth certificate, to me is not a lawful means of identification. But people today want to have a birth certificate if you want to get documentation, like if you for some reason you want to have a passport, or things that now they're saying this government has changed, and now they're saying you need to do that to even vote or to have identification. What you can do is you can go, instead of having a birth certificate because you have lawfully corrected your status, you can lawfully correct your status and have that documentation. And then you can submit that documentation if you want to for a birth record. Now, I wouldn't do that, but I'm just giving people options to stop making excuses on still carrying the slave term name that you should not be carrying. There's no reason for us in this era time to be carrying names that delude to slavery. Absolutely none. And so when we talk about means of identification, your nationality card is a means of identification. It says this is your nationality and identification card for the Moorish Science of America and birthrights for the Moorish Americans. So it serves three purposes. If your nationality card is done correctly, you know how to put the right paperwork in correctly. And you may have to have a class and be taught. You may have to have a one-on-one lesson where whoever the leader of the group that you're attending is, or, you know, I'm not sure. Like there's a lot of groups out here, so I don't know what they're teaching because I don't join any of these groups that are popping up here and there. I don't join those groups. But if there's someone that's truly out there assisting you with this, and you're under a certain group, then you should talk to them about how can you correct your status lawfully and take care of that, and your children. So if your children were born with a slave name like you had, now you need to correct their status, because why? It is their right. Your child and grandchildren all have a right to a name, a nationality, a birthright. They have the right to that. And people say, well, it's appellation. Yes, appellation, because you don't want to use name, but appellation, if you look up the definition of appellation, it means to have a name. Okay. So in my book in chapter pages 9 through 10, the letter pertaining to a birth certificate, I talk about registration and identification, historical records, documentation systems, nationality and lawful and legal identity, shared parental responsibility, family structure, child development, and balance in the home. So that's what I do talk about when it comes to that. All right. And so when we're talking about the birth certificate, and a lot of times people want to use it as a means of identification. I'm coming back to this book again. And on page 9 and 10, I just want to go through some of the pages, not all of them. You really need to get the book to read it. But one of the reasons that I wrote this book, and I want to read to you all this letter that when I'm talking about this. So the reason most of us have no knowledge of what this, so let me start here on page 8. When we think of the rights of the child, of our children, we think that they may and I conceive a child. The child grows inside my womb. I cultivate this seed for 10 lunar months, which is equal to 9 months, but 10 lunar months. I give birth to this child. This is a special and prideful moment. And then I'm asked to sign a birth certificate asking for my child's name, my name, and the father's name. What is the real reason behind this information? And what does this certificate mean once it is signed? Most of us have no knowledge of what this record means, and even that it is a contract in law. Let me digress for a moment and define the meaning of a contract. A contract is a legally enforceable agreement between two or more parties where each assumes a legal or lawful obligation that must be completed. That is a contract. That's why a lot of times when you're being sued by companies and you don't understand why they're suing you, and you say, I'm a Moor, this should be free, you signed a contract. And so if you don't obligate the contract, they're coming after you for breaking the contract. Now you may ask, what is my legal or lawful obligation, which is a simulation of law? Legal is a simulation of law when I sign this birth certificate. I am going to share with you what the state of California, Shasta County, wrote to this parent about what privileges the child would not have, because she refused to sign a birth certificate. And so I put this in my book, and letter pertaining to a birth certificate. This letter is from the Health Services Agency of the County of Shasta, California, which illustrates significance and consequences of having or not having a birth certificate. This was dated August the 6th, 1985. Dear Miss R, as I understand it, you gave birth to twin girls on July 30th and 31st, 1985. So one of them came out before the midnight and the other one came after midnight. So that's why you see where it's saying 30 and 35. 1985 at Mercy Medical Center of Redding, California. I also understand from the hospital staff that you did not desire to register the birth of your girls with them at this time. I'm writing to inform you of information you may be unaware of. According to state regulations, if you do not register your daughter's birth within the first year of their delivery, they would then have to be registered on the delayed registration of birth form, and the cost would be this time $15, considering the fact that you delivered in a hospital and had a physician in attendance. This would probably be of no consequence or trouble for you now, but in later years, this may be a problem for your daughters. I am sure you are aware of the utmost importance in having a birth certificate as soon as possible. In 20 years, the hospital records could have been destroyed, and your physician may not be available to help you or your girls. Consider the fact that in order to be registered for school, apply for a marriage license, grants, or scholarships in school. The state of California requires a certificate copy of a birth certificate. The federal government requires a certificate file copy of a birth certificate when applying for military service, passport, or social security card. When you realize all the times they may need their certificate of birth, you may want to contact me and we'll arrange to have them take care of it for you. Please contact me with any question in this matter. Sincerely, Linda L. Allen, Deputy Register of Vital Statistics. Now, they wrote this to the letter. Okay. They wrote that, and so Miss Allen replies, okay, that in 1985, without a birth, so Miss Allen implies with this letter that in 1985, without a birth certificate, you couldn't attend or be forced to attend public schools, couldn't get or be forced to get certain licenses, and couldn't even apply for a Social Security card. Without a Social Security card, you would not be responsible for paying state or federal income taxes. In fact, the relationship established by birth certificate with government is far deeper than Miss Allen's letter applies. It means that these children will not be owned by the state or federal government. She seemed to imply that there was something wrong with not wanting to register your child as property. I would say this parent was smart and knew exactly what she was doing. However, Mrs. Allen was insisting that this is something that needed to be done. Today, most of us do not take the time to think like Mrs. R. We voluntarily register our children. They become federal and state property and subjects of Congress. A copy of the birth certificate is sent to the Department of Vital Statistics in the state in which the child was born. The original birth certificate is sent to the Department of Commerce in New Columbia, the former District of Columbia. And then your child's future labor, properties, and bodies are put up as collateral for the public debt. This is the first step in the United States incorporation control and custody of our children. All right, and so then this is when the government seeks to start wanting ownership of your child, because what you have done is you put your child up as property, collateral. You made your child a ward of the state. And if you don't believe me, look on the birth certificate. It says wardship. The child becomes a ward of the state. So when they come into your homes and take your child, that's why. Now, one family told me, I was working a case, and they said, well, Prime Minister, we didn't even do a birth record for the child. Come to find out, the mother did do a birth record the father didn't know about. So they were telling me, well, that they came in and took our children, and there was no birth certificate or anything like that. And so therefore, the mother did register the child. And so that's what happened. But the father did not agree. So now what he has to do is he had to go to the state and say that he didn't want his child to have a birth record. But the state would not honor that and take the child off the birth record. So now if the state comes into your home to try to take your children from you and you did not sign a contract, you have them dead to right. They cannot remove your child from their home. But now let's say they do, because, a lot of times we say they cannot and they do what they want. You have the lawful means to get your child back into your home because you never signed a contract. They will come in and try to take you. And we had this situation in our school, a family where they try to come in and take the children from the parent in the household, but the parents knew their rights and they didn't let them come in and take their child from the household. And they're being schooled by online schooling for more children. So it's a matter of knowing your rights and fighting for your rights to be able to keep your children. But when you have signed a birth record, and we do it, it's not knowingly, because before someone was teaching us about these birth certificates, we didn't know. Now, what you can do is get a birth certificate from your child, from the Morse headquarters. You can get a birth certificate here. We do birth certificates here. And you can submit that birth record when you need to, but the government will probably not honor it because they have their own system, just like we have our own system. But that's why it's imperative that we start our own system. And we know that we have the Morse birth registry. We know that Timothy Dingle-Ill and his brother Richardson reestablished the Morse registry, the Bureau of Morse. It was the Bureau, the Morse Bureau of Vital Statistics, and they went to Washington, D.C. The thing that I'm still, all these years, I've learned about this in 1991, about them doing it in 1991. From 1991 to present day, I am still trying to get a copy of that registry of the Bureau of Vital Statistics that they registered. So it was said it was registered. It's put in books that it's registered. We have to know that these people are crooked. But what I set up was our own Morse Vital Statistics right here at the headquarters. We do our own birth certificates. We put our own children's feet on the certificate, and that's a lawful document because your government has created a birth certificate for your child. You do not have to get a birth certificate from their government institutions. And the reason why is because it makes your child a ward of the state. People say, well, Prime Minister, I had my baby in the hospital and they wouldn't let me leave without a birth certificate. That's not true. You can leave whenever you get ready, and they cannot stop you from taking your child and leaving. Now, the better thing to do, I know that some people even said they've called the cops or the policy enforcement, whatever, on them, without signing a birth certificate, and you can't leave with your child. You have to fight. Unfortunately, these things are happening. I wasn't there. I don't know the whole thing behind it, but I fought with families to get their children back. I fought with families to make sure they never have to have a birth certificate for their children. But you have to be honorable and be right and be willing to do the fight, because you're talking about the rights of your child. Your child has the right to be born and do not have to have a birth certificate with the government and become a ward of the state. That is your child's right. Your child is entitled from birth to a name and a nationality. And as mothers, fathers, we have to make sure that that's happening. And if we are grandparents of our children, and our children are having children, we have to make sure that we help them carry this out. It's very, very important that if you do not want, now, I can't tell you what you want and do not want. I'm only telling you the truth. You do not have to have a birth certificate from them for your child. You should have a record of birth, proven birth for your child, for you, but it does not have to come from that government. My uncle told me that back in the day, what they did, and they took the Quran because the Bible, so-called Piscean records, they had those where they it had inside of there where they had people applications to fill out for birth. And I think he said they may had up to 5 or 6, 7, something like that. And then, of course, you started having ad documents. So what they started doing was creating the birth records inside the Quran, the Universal Quran, not the Circle 7. And they would have records of all the births of the children. So that way they had the records, and they had their own birth records. And he told me some people were still afraid because a lot of our family married people that were not in more science. So of course you marry outside of that, and that they wanted birth certificates. So everyone's not in the book. Some of them didn't want to be put in the book because they wanted to have that document or whatever. But you can only give people what they're willing to accept. And so a lot of us feel like assimilation to the government is the way to go. And so I can't tell you that that's not what you should do for your children. I'm not telling you that. What I'm telling you is it makes your child property and a ward of the state. That is what I'm telling you. When you create birth certificates for your children, that's what happens. And I know that a lot of times, because mothers need to get social assistance if they don't have any way to take care of their children. And with that, they believe that they have to have the birth certificate from them, the proof of birth. But let me tell you something interesting that the woman told me at the Social Security office. It was the Social Security office. I was down there fighting for something for my grandchildren at the Social Security office because I cannot recall what it was now, something that I had to do for my daughter. But anyway, the lady said to me, "Oh, we don't need no birth certificate to know that your child is born." That's exactly what she said. Because I went down and she said, "We don't need a birth certificate because obviously the child was born, the child is here. So that's not what we need. What we need proof is that they're in school," which I provided for them, that they were in school. That's what it was. That they needed proof about my grandchildren being in school because, they try to come to people's houses and they try to intimidate you with, truancy and all of that. So that's what that was about. And the lady said, "Don't worry about no birth certificate. I don't. We know the child was born. The children are here." So the birth certificate was not even relevant to her. Now that Trump has made a big thing about the birth certificate, it may be, but I'm just telling you what I did at the time. And that's all she needed was proof from me and signed, sealed documents, which we sealed and took down to them to prove that the children were in school. So, a lot of times we put a lot of effort on things that is not true. It's not there. Now we know that I'm not sure what's going on. I'm trying to get all the updated information so I can find out how to guide those people who follow up underneath my lineage, who come underneath me, who follow the Moorish Divine and National Movement, who follow the Moorish Science Temple 77 here. I want to make sure that I, guide them the correct way. So now I have to get, what do we do now? What information do we need to send in now to update that information for someone who, does not want to be in the system? You can live your whole entire life out of the system, believe it or not. You don't have to have a social security card. You don't have to have a birth record, not even from here if you do not want one. As long as you know when your child was born, you can do everything off the grid. If you desire to do so, you can live off the grid. It may be a little challenging, but you could do so. But you have to make a life for yourself off the grid, which means you have to you have to do for yourself economically. You have to make sure that you have a way to feed your children, clothe your children, take care of your children. So these are things that we should think about long before we even have a child. And so this is the things that we need to do. We have to know what we need to do, what we're responsible for, and the rights of our children, and the things to make sure that our children are protected at all times. Once you become a parent, your child is your ultimate responsibility. I'm going to take a quick break, drink some tea, and read some of the comments in the chat. All right. All right. So we're going to go to lovely Emmy 1221. I have grandchildren. I can't see without the other grandmother. How can I get around this? All right. So I would have to find out all the circumstances around it and any documentation that was signed or whatever it is. So we would have to do a one-on-one. So what you would need to do is send me an email to realmorsetalk@yahoo.com. And, we can talk about what's going on. You need to first, before you make the appointment, gather all the information in what you're speaking about. And let's find out how this happened, who put this in place, and what we can do to, you know, for whatever reason it was put in place, what we can do to make it better for you, that you can see your grandchildren without the other grandmother. But I need all the circumstances. I don't want to give you something that's there without having all of the information. So please do that. Remember, it's always up here, realmorsetalk@yahoo.com. All right, and that's from lovely Me Bay 1221. All right. Bilal Bay. It's on Prime Minister. So in other words, the correction of your name is symbolic to freedom, because the name of the European is a type of enslavement, a freedom in truth. Yes, Sheik, that would be the case. And let me just say this while we're on that, because it's a sister that has a video out, and I'm always in support. I was so excited to see another sister talking about information. I wanted to listen to what she had to say. And she's talking about this package that she has out with the trust and all of that, which is pretty, I don't know about what type of trust she's speaking about and all that. I would have to look into that. But anyway, she was talking, and then the next thing she talked about was, she said George Washington was a Moor. Now, he was part of the Whig-a-Moor party, and I'm not sure if she was trying to say that the Whig-a-Moor party, we know, were Europeans that dressed up in powder wigs, and they literally did everything against Moors. So we know the Whig-a-Moor party, he was a part of the Whig-a-Moor party. But then she said everybody with the name Washington is a Moor. So to me, she was including Europeans too. And I'm like, I think that's a little backwards, because the name Washington came from enslavement, being strangers in your own land. So how do you take and say, oh, Washington is, anybody with the name Washington is a Moor, when we know that Washington came from the slave name? So I wasn't really getting what she was trying to say. You need to get rid of the name Washington, but everybody's Washington, unless you're saying melanated people are Moors, but it has nothing to do with George Washington being a Moor. George Washington, we know, was a slave owner. He owned slaves. So he owned our people. Okay. And I don't even like the word own. I would say made us strangers in our own land, because ownership, we were considered property to George Washington. And so as long as you keep the property names, then you're still property. These Europeans feel like you property. This is why they give you such a hard time in correcting your status or changing it, because they want to keep you property. When you no longer carry their name, then you're free. And a slave cannot own property. So you keep saying about holding on to these names, Prophet Noble Jolly never told anyone to hold on to those names. He didn't say that. He told you to give them back everything that belongs to them. And he said, as long as you keep holding on to those things that delude to slavery. So you have to give them back those names. You cannot act like the prophet didn't tell you that, because your mother or your aunt or uncle, listen, I don't care who gave you the name. They did not know any better. So you not to honor them by correcting your status. And people don't like it when I say that, but this is not about emotional rhetoric, about, your emotional feelings. It's about the truth. So you emotionally want to hold on to a name. All right, that's what you want to do. Hold on to a name. All right, that deludes to slavery. So I can't can't be responsible for your emotional connection to the name. You have to correct that name to make sure that you put your name correctly. All right, this is Real Morse Talk. This is Real Morse Talk. So that's what we're talking about, those things. So I shared that letter with you all. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to go back to what I was speaking about. All right. So the states, governments, and ownership. I just want to finish up this little bit of reading here on 10, 11, and then, we'll talk a little bit more. But I want to go back. The state government's ownership of American children is not a secret. It started long before the signing of the birth certificate for Asiatics of African descent whose families were enslaved. It started its conception on July 4th, 1804. Slaveholders had to report to the county clerk when an enslaved mother in their household gave birth to a child. The county clerk then recorded the births in bounds, volumes, books with a hard protective cover. These county records were necessary to prove the child's age and eligibility for freedom at the age of 21. For the feminine child, or age 25 for the masculine children. So in the feminine children, you were released at 21. For the masculine child, it was age 25. Under the provisions of the 1804 Act for the gradual abolishment of slavery. I'm going to give you a quick example of the record. Here's an example of families' records kept to birth. Slave birth records after emancipation. On a large plantation called New Providence in Mississippi, a slave owner's family constructed a birth record of their slaves. In these records, the name of the child and the month, a day, and year in which she or he was born began in 1839 and finally ended in 1870. There is no accepted steep decline of births toward the end of the list. The Civil War supposedly emancipated the slaves in 1865, and yet the family kept records of their slaves in the household up until 1870. Birth records of this type were not uncommon in the South on slaveholding plantations and were helpful to slave owners keeping account of their property. And so we were considered property to these people. We're considered property. And I want to stop there because I do want to go. We said this is a part 2 to this. So this is part 1 today. And there is a part 2 because I want to get into more information on the rights of the child and then your parental rights as a parent, your parental rights and what you have the rights to and to not do. And this is universal rights. This is rights from here in the United States because we're an international organization all the way to Africa. And I mean, I went through, in my book, I covered all of the Asiatic territories in there and what the rights are because, different territories try to have different information of rights. And so I'm trusting that you all have been enjoying the information that I'm sharing today on Real Morse Talk. I do want to say that we do need your support. Again, as I talked about our school today, support our online schooling for Morse children. You can donate to $ online schooling MC. That's what you can do to donate. Excuse me, I have so much saliva in my mouth today. And then also, you can go to our Daughters of Drew Ali, which is our humanitarian organization. We're still trying to rebuild that. We need your support in dollars to do that. $ Daughters of Drew Ali. And you can also purchase books from our books. You can purchase books from circle7publishing.com. This book that I'm reading from, if you purchase it now by next Thursday, I should be able to get it out to you so you can follow me online with this. We'll make sure, me and my son will make sure we get them pumped out to you, by the next time we meet. If The Rights of the Child is the name of the book, that's only $10. So they donate the $10, purchase The Rights of the Child book from us. from circle7publishing.com. All right. You can also donate to us. If you do not have any type of cash app, you can donate more science with GSKS Durriyyah.com. I have a lot of Moors that donate, through that, organization, do that. And then we do want to thank Londell Sykes for your ongoing support of sending a donation when you can here and there. I don't know if I've seen you on this call since then, but I do appreciate you, caring enough and believing us enough and not thinking that we're some type of scam or trying to, a lot of Asiatics think that everybody that comes on here is scamming and trying to take fiat out of your pocket. But what I look at is the amount of Asiatics that we have, conscious and unconscious. If you would donate $1, $2, like a bunch of you all views 1,000, imagine if 1,000 people viewed this and sent that dollar, just $1 each. That would be $1,000 that would be generated to uplifting to one of these. And listen, you can say what your dollar is for. If it's for the Doors of Drew Ali with the $ Doors of Drew Ali, if it's for the online schooling for Moorish children, you could say that it's for the online schooling for Moorish children, $ online schooling for Moorish children. If you want to just send fiat to donate for us to use it how we need to use it, or if you want to put a message in here, you see that donate sign with the red arrow, More Science with GSKS Durriyyah.com. So we do need your ongoing support. It does take revenue to put on this every single Thursday because, listen, this platform is not free. We as Moors don't have platforms yet where we can have Moors come on and talk and you're not being charged for the platform. That we do not have that. And so we have to use what's available to us. And so for every Thursday I come here, and every Thursday I strive to give you information, whether you agree or disagree, like it or do not like it. We're here on Real Moors Talk to be able to support you. And I want to continue this conversation, this important conversation about the rights of the child. And like I said, you will not regret getting this book, The Rights of the Child, because a lot of times we just do not know what the rights of our child is. And think about it, you are someone's child. So when we're talking about the rights of the child, we're also including you, but you're also someone's parent, someone's mother, and someone's father. And so we're including that too. So we have to start looking at the world a little bit differently than we're looking at it right now, Moors. We have to start doing better for ourselves. Okay. And please share this video with as many people as you can. Continue to share it. Know that next week we're going to be on part 2. I think that's going to be hot and heavy because we're going to get into more of the rights of the child, some of the documents that support the rights of the child that I'm speaking of, and then your parental rights for your children. Okay. This has been an episode 18 of Real Moors Talk. I am your hostess, always looking forward to every Thursday sharing with you. And we're coming into a new month because we'll be in the month of June for our new episode. So until then, Moors, until next Thursday, and always take care of yourselves and each other. You have been on Shadow Hour, Real Moors Talk with me, Prime Minister, National Grand Sheikh Durriyyah.